would be told is religious, and I propose that it may not be. Here is the memorial. I used to struggle, and still do. Even in early psychology, they understood this separate, false identity, the ego, they called it, the artificial self that is created, oftentimes by the time we're 7 years old, imprinted or tattooed into our being. And understanding this doesn't make it any easier. Now it's this struggle, and for a long time, spiritual practices taught ways to abolish the ego, and you would kind of end up like this monk, maybe like a Buddhist. The Taoist, a little more rebellious, not having fixed or hardened ideas, but essentially doing the same thing, but being a little bit more free than the Buddhist. And I think these are footsteps, paths for us, but not the final destination. Not flipping from one to another. One being the false self, which most people will live and die as. And for those that are aware of it, might go back and forth. Strong emotions pull us into the false self. The false self clings to be, to exist. The I Ching says something to the extent of let your higher self guide your lower self. The I Ching being a Taoist classic, and I think this makes more sense. We're not trying to eliminate one for another. It understands that both will exist. Again, that this is like some mark or tattoo that you carry with you, but it is certainly your lower self. And what is your higher self? Your higher self is the awareness, the non-judgmental, all-seeing eye within you, the awareness, presence in the moment, no past, no future, and this exists in all living beings. I relate this to my own life and my sadness that I've been feeling with the loss of my cat, and this is definitely the lower self, clinging to impermanence, a losing battle, but we can honor our lower self. We don't need to punish it or beat it up. We can honor it like our inner child, and we don't need to push away the emotions. We just need to observe them with the awareness, the higher self, again, that exists in everything, the spark of God, of the all, and we just observe our emotions. We don't push them away. It doesn't help. Pushing them away only seems to intensify them, and both exist. The higher self with the awareness can comfort the lower self and help dissolve the friction, help it melt. And I think that's the idea of meditation. It's just helping us return to the higher self awareness and presence. It's so simple, but so difficult if we're struggling from our false sense of self's perspective. And this feels more complete, some kind of internal harmony, accepting the past and present, accepting the emotions, listening to the emotions, and moving forward without a need to cling to anything. Today I wanted to look at some postcard. First I want to look at some utilities, then some forts, some prisons, and some horse and wagon photos, just to get a feel for life back then. Very exciting. I thank you for being here, and welcome. So here we are at the Clock Tower and Waterworks Park in Detroit, Michigan. And I should have started with the Hagia Sophia, or however you say it. Let's have a look at that and all its towers and domes. Very important, I think, to have some kind of grand reference, something we would be told is religious. And I propose that it may not be. Here is the Memorial Gate Waterworks Park in Detroit. So just the Memorial Gate. We're not even looking at the whole waterworks facility, but we do see a super tower back here. Here we have a pumping station in St. Louis, Missouri. the pumping station. Very imposing series of brick structures with archways, portholes, very castle-y. Here we have, again, the Waterworks Park and Lake in Detroit, Michigan. Seeing some more towers. And here, one of my favorite. I'll try to inject a better picture. Next, I want to look at some gasworks. Not long ago, we were looking at an old bird's eye view of Philly, and we could see these way back in the oldest depictions of the city. These are like a type of meter going up and down, giving an indication of how much gas is in the tank, similar to a little turkey thermometer popping up and down, I guess just up. But here we can see some domage, and everything moving forward would lose this decorative style. I mean, the castle style. And a lot of these buildings that we thought were from the industrial age are just these old castles dumbed down. All the features squared off and being used to this day. This is showing Fort Wayne, and we're going to look at some forts in a minute. But just to make a case that perhaps all the grandest buildings were actually utilities, we can see this postcard. And this section, just this section here, they're telling us is the filtration. Here we go. And this other super area back here, sorry, the resolution is poor, so I won't zoom in. But here we see the sewage treatment works, similar to what I proposed with the Sutro baths in San Francisco. They were not bath houses, but rather treatment facilities. And here they turn this one into a city light and power plant. And this very residential looking structure became the consolidated offices. Oftentimes all of these are laid out like a major complex, an absolute city, self-contained, sewage treatment, power plants, and we would just jumpstart all of this. Here we are in Iowa, Cedar Rapids Waterworks. Absolute castle, very beautiful. And here we have a waterworks building in Omaha, Nebraska. Nebraska, usually we think of corn, and that's about it actually. But here we go, Old World, Nebraska. Not even a courthouse, not a city hall, but a waterworks building. Oh yeah. And here, speaking of utilities, this is the headquarters of PG&E in San Francisco. If you remember, there was a movie called Aaron Brockovich. I wanted to say Brockhurst. Shout out to James. And anyway, this evil company, still doing their evils to this day, I'm sure, ended up ruining a community, taking out a great percentage of its population through releasing toxins into the water, and it's going strong today all around me in the Uinta Basin. The Uinta Basin is like China, really. There's no emissions regulations whatsoever. There's fires burning all around me, controlled fires burning off gas because they want the oil, just polluting away. All the environmental stuff is a show meant to make the city dwellers feel guilty. But anyway, PG&E, bastards. So now I've saved a little small collection of forts. This is a fort in Minnesota, Fort Snelling, just what's left of it. Here we go. This, of course, we've looked at in detail in past videos. Fort Ticonderoga in New York, a star fort, and just a lot of fortification, most of it buried, and what is revealed is on the edge of this drop-off here. One of the most perplexing things in this research are the ice palaces. I made a video on Leadville, Colorado, the highest city in the country, and they had an ice palace, an ice castle palace, and I'm not sure. I kind of am not buying it, but here this one is in Montreal in Canada, and it was an ice palace and a fort. I don't know what to make of it. I think this is kind of like a World's Fair idea to tell us it was disposable and temporary and why it's gone when there's old pictures of it. And even here, just a rendering. And just to show real quick that this is realm-wide, here is a fort and palace in in India or somewhere over there. And back to Old Fort, Massachusetts. Ship Island, Mississippi, perhaps. Anyway, most of it is buried. We see all these plug holes and very Romanesque. Old Fort, Massachusetts. And though these are all forts, we are told, I think not. I'm lumping all of this into utilities. Especially here, look at the Star Fortage in Virginia. Fortress Monroe. That's interesting. Not a fort, but a fortress. And here again, Roman aqueducts, towers, castle in the background, Star Fortage. I mean, just unbelievable here. And now I want to have a moment of perspective. And perhaps we'll call this part 2. Boom. So here is Fort Davins in Massachusetts proper. Concurrent camp, whatever, some kind of camp and fort. And this is what we would expect to see. Even the modest looking dwelling in the background and all these tents. And not even nice tents. Look at the crooked little poles. And I think that's what we would expect of these people. These are a tent people. Anything of value, anything glorious, has been inherited. Even their clothing, in my opinion. Even their roads to travel. Here we see Skyline Drive in Cannon City, Colorado. Really just old ruins, an old wall. Here we see the Deadwood stage. U.S. mail. Here we go. The U.S. mail. So here's how they're delivering the mail. Very important, the mail. The system does not function without the postal system, or the artificial system. The real system will go on. This is in Kearney, Nebraska. There we go. I mean, just a sad display. The nicest thing in this picture is their suits. Here we are traveling on a trail in California. A family. Here we've got 5 people up here, maybe another 6 or 7 packed in here, man on a bike following behind, and this requires a team of 6 horses. So just perspective, that's what I was looking for. The modes of transportation, and then things like this. Right from the get-go, still existing today. You can't get rid of things like this. Suppose you could with a bomb. And this makes sense to me. A tent, looking at those people, being a human myself, understanding that if I was in their predicament, I'm going to have a handsaw, a hammer, we can sew, then something like this. Here is a state prison in Kansas. Kansas, really not known for anything. Maybe the Wizard of Oz, tornadoes, and agriculture. But here we have their prison, a perfect castle. Here we have a prison in Montana. Montana, certainly known for cowboys, still one of the least populated states. And here's the old prison. This photo looks like it was taken in the 70s. And back to California, Folsom Prison. Johnny Cash, of course, sung about this prison. He knew he couldn't be free. He could hear the train going by and imagined people smoking big cigars and drinking coffee. And here's where that would have been. We see a sharp corner, starfort angle, water around it. It's a building built in the water, towers everywhere. Serious construction here, not just a building, just forming this hillside. Wall after wall, tunnels, as we see down here. Prison. Mind you, this is a very old photo, as all of these are, except for that 70s one. But anyway, you see ivy covering this thing, just engulfed in ivy. Same with Alcatraz in San Francisco. Just old world areas that have been repurposed. Here we have the state penitentiary in Cannon City, or Canyon City. I've been there. I used to live in Hartselle, Colorado, just north of it, around an hour, and I didn't visit the prison. I wish I would have. And here she is. See again the sharp corner, Starfort corner. Even in this picture, it appears to be in ruins. But what we see are canals. You see the canals coming right through here, little bridges going over it, sharp corner, and then it just shoots to the right. So this has all the features of a waterworks. And instead it became a prison. And here's a couple old worlders in New Jersey, Trenton, New Jersey, and it's a prison. I mean, this thing is crazy. These columns, almost the Grecian, Egyptian kind of feel. I've seen a lot of these everywhere, Egypt to California. But what an interesting building. And just anything could be anything. Nothing making any sense according to their narrative. This they could have called a brewery. And we've seen breweries look like castles over and over. And everyone just thinks that's normal. A castle as a prison, as a water treatment plant. Just ridiculous. Here we are in Wisconsin. I thought this one was really interesting. Unbelievable. Why? Oh, we need to let light in for the prisoners. That's why we built a wall of arches. I mean, that would be nice if they thought that way. But no. In Waupun, Wisconsin, the prison, is it still there today? I wonder what the rest of the structure looks like. This is just the edge. And here's the Indiana State Prison, Michigan City, Indiana. We have a date of 1880 up here, 1897, and just very Richardsonian here. These stubby columns, this grand arch, even the detail above this door. Just a little feature at the prison. In this one, I just feel like I've seen this type of building over and over and over. In this case, it's the Women's State Prison. All this way back when for the Women's State Prison in Joliet, Illinois. So Illinois has waterworks buildings that look like this, and then they have prisons that look like this. And then we'll just end with this little castle that was torn down, that was originally in Sugar House Park in Salt Lake City. The state prison. And this prison is kind of a narrative buster. This prison was built by the federal government, actually, before Utah was a state. While the Mormons are fleeing the east and settling, we're told, in Utah, the federal government is right there all along. They built Fort Douglas, which is now the University of Utah campus. They built this prison right alongside the Mormon settlers. So while all of this is going on, the implanting of a new people, we have the Civil War going on. And the Civil War just doesn't really seem like the Civil War. Here we can see the ruins of an old McDonald's, and this man is upset that he will not get an Egg McMuffin this morning. But seriously, what strange pictures. Just beautiful brick and concrete ruins. Even here, brick on the ground. These kids just hanging out in this war zone. This war zone and this glass light pole still standing. And clearly concrete and brick. That's all there is to it. Here we can see another column about 6 feet away from them. And I think this is the beginning. They're taking these pictures to document the beginning. And we're told this was a war. And I think the inheriting of every city begins with a military operation. But the battle is not what we're told. And the ruins of the city are not the results of a battle, but rather some great destructive force, a reset. Most of the pictures are just staged. Everyone looking like they have never seen a day of battle and just enjoying their new oversized clothing. Here is something that was built. A shabby little tent with a pine port. Here a group of posers at Gettysburg. And just a sad affair. These tent people. And this looks like a modest home. And notice the growth of trees all around it. And then here down the street. Here we go. The blockage that I find in the middle of the desert in Utah. Beautiful concrete sidewalks. Access to utilities right here. Gorgeous curb. This monument and these buildings. Fully powered up before power. There we go. Civil War photo. Power before power. Just this planter shouldn't exist. This is pretty interesting. This bridge, the old stone bridge. I mean, this is supposed to be Civil War. Again, we see power. We see a pyramid in the middle of the damn bridge. And it looks like we're taking this picture from another bridge, a couple 100 feet away. Here again, mocking us. The photographer probably said, "All right, guys, I need you to look like you've been fighting in a war." And here they're chuckling, putting up their dukes. No, these men are not fighting men. These are not their clothes. And here's their pathetic little shanty town. Here is what they would build. Here again, another little look at downtown life. So this blend of some old world, beautiful, in ruins, and a junk world a mud and horse and wagon people. This is titled A Casualty of War. Beautiful brick building in absolute ruins, overgrown, and just the shell remaining. Vegetation growing up top here, like it's been sitting in this condition for at least 50 years. And here's where it really gets weird. When we start seeing the soldiers posing, we see fake backdrops, we see the strangest looking people and expression on their faces. Terrified, actually. Just completely terrified look, and the whole thing is pretty terrifying, actually. These guys are somebody's puppets, not men of battle. These are like orphans who have been mistreated and now being forced to pose in this rather gay fashion. And this is our history. This is the Civil War. Completely awkward. The most awkward pictures I've probably ever seen. Everything about it is wrong. And I have made a video in the past discussing that, but I think it was important to mention while we look at the ruins of the Civil War. Here are the ruins. In 1865, we are told, ruins of the Civil War, and those guys are posing with arms interlocked, hands on each other's legs, crude horse and buggy, and you have like these ruins of what seem like apartment buildings. Even with the destruction, they couldn't bring down this infrastructure. It was such quality brick and concrete, as we just saw a minute ago. And what a mess. What an absolute mess. Now in this community, there's probably the question, was this all reset and then we arrived? Or did our founding fathers, whoever they really are, arrive and then reset with some technology such as the fasces, or even something that could be deployed via air or airship, like a fasces or some sort of Archimedes mirror, essentially a giant magnifying glass. It's hard to say, but what is certain is the people that we see are not responsible for the ruins that we see. But what do I know? For this week, I thank you for joining me. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you soon.